Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mike. You guys are rocking with me and Mike's Intellectual Corner. On today's episode, we are diving into Napoleon's Marshals. I'm pretty excited for this one. I'm pretty much calling this part 2 of my Napoleonic Wars series. We just went through all the battles. Now we're going to go through the Marshals. I'm excited. Let's roll.
Terror belli, decus pacis. Terror in war, ornament in peace. The words inscribed on every French marshal's baton. In France, the title of Marshal or Maréchal goes back at least to the 13th century. It represents the highest possible position of military authority. Authority symbolized by a marshal's baton. The title was abolished during the French Revolution.
And so before we go ahead and get really into this, I'm going to go ahead and say it right now. My favorite marshal by far was Marshal Ney, just for the fact that what he did on their retreat from Moscow, whenever him and I think it was 6,000 of his men in the that were part of the rear guard were freaking surrounded by 55,000 Russians or something like that, and he was able to still get 600 of them back home. To me, that right there sealed it for me. Yeah, Marshal Ney is, for me, my favorite marshal, but let's go.
The title was abolished during the French Revolution as incompatible with the egalitarian spirit of the age. But in 1804, Napoleon founded a new empire and restored the ancient rank. That year he picked 18 of France's best generals and made them Marshals of the Empire. 8 more were created in the years that followed.
I'm just going to say this too. In my opinion, I definitely say that Thomas Alexander Dumas should have been picked as one of those generals to be a marshal, because him and Marat would have been a terror on the field with their cavalry. I don't care what you say. Both of them together would have been too perfect, but I digress. We got what we got, so let's keep going.
The Marshals of the Empire. 8 more were created in the years that followed. The Marshals outranked everyone in the new empire, apart from Napoleon's family, princes, and ministers of state. They came from every background, sons of aristocrats and innkeepers, professional soldiers, and those who'd learned on the job, old-school Republicans and Bonaparte loyalists. The youngest, just half the age of the oldest.
With half the hair too. No, I'm just playing. I can't do devote like that.
And though Marshal was a civil title, not strictly a military rank, the men known to the army as les gros bonnets, the big hats, were arguably the most extraordinary, diverse, brilliant, and flawed group of military commanders in history. The most favoured were showered with titles and wealth. But the price too was high. Half were wounded, 3 were killed or died of wounds, 2 were executed.
And what, I know at least 2 of that we know turned on him, but I'm sure a few other ones did too, so we'll see. But at least we know Marmont definitely did at the end. If it wasn't for him, Napoleon's son would have probably inherited his empire, making it way easier for him to take back his empire and all the other stuff. But and at least making it so that the Napoleon essentially name and family gets to keep this title. But that all got thrown out the window. But let's see.
This is Epic History TV's guide to Napoleon's Marshals. All 26 have been ranked according to our own evaluation of their achievements as marshals, with expert guidance from retired Lieutenant Colonel Remy Porte, former chief historian of the French Army. More than 2,000 French generals served in the Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars. Many were brilliant leaders. A few probably deserved to be marshals, more than some who were. Any selection can only be difficult and highly subjective, but here's our pick of 12 of the best.
Again, I will always say this: if you ever want to talk Napoleonic Wars with me, Alexander Dumas should have been a marshal. 100%. Because as I just said, him and Marat would have been devastating on the battlefield.
Objective, but here's our pick of 12 of the best. Bertrand, Napoleon's faithful aide-de-camp, who commanded 4th Corps at the Battle of Leipzig. Clausel, a veteran commander of the war in Spain. Desaix, Napoleon's close friend, killed at Marengo, aged 31. Prince Eugène, Napoleon's adopted son, a hero of the Russian retreat. Gérard, one of Napoleon's best corps commanders by 1814, made a marshal by King Louis-Philippe in 1830. Goudon, whose infantry division bore the brunt of the fighting at Auerstedt in 1806, died of wounds near Smolensk in 1812. Junot, who first served with Napoleon at Toulon in 1793, probably committed suicide after his fall from favour in 1813. Lasalle, the Hussar general, among the best light cavalry commanders of the Napoleonic Wars, killed at Wagram, aged 34. Maison, who told his division on the morning of Leipzig that they must win that day or all be killed, made marshal by King Charles X in 1829. Nansouty, the heavy cavalry commander who died of wounds and exhaustion, aged 46. Saint-Hilaire, hero of Austerlitz, died of wounds received at Aspern in 1809. Vandamme, of whom Napoleon once said, "If I had to invade hell, I'd want him commanding the vanguard." And now, Napoleon's 26 marshals, ranked in order of merit. 26. Marshal Perignon. When Napoleon created the first 18 marshals, 4 were honorary marshals, recognised for past service to France. Perignon was one of these. A former officer in the Royal Army, he'd won fame in the Revolutionary Wars, fighting the Spanish on the Pyrenees front. He later served as ambassador to Spain. After a brief retirement, he was sent to Italy and commanded the French left wing at the disastrous Battle of Novi, where the army was routed by Suvorov's Russians, and Perignon was badly wounded and captured. His appointment as honorary marshal in 1804 was a political move by Napoleon, a way to win acceptance for his new empire, by emphasizing continuity with the revolution, by rewarding its military heroes. Perignon never held active command as a marshal, but served as governor of Parma, and later Naples. His eldest son, Pierre, was a cavalry officer, killed at Friedland in 1807. Perignon retired in 1813, but refused to support Napoleon when he returned from exile in 1815 and was stripped of his marshal's baton. His rank was later restored by King Louis XVIII.
I wonder if he still had some sentiment behind his son dying at the hands of essentially what could have been, in his mind, Napoleon's just ongoing drudging of dragging, France into constant wars and stuff. If it wasn't for Napoleon, his son would still be alive. Maybe that's what he was thinking.
18th. 25. Marshal Beauroon. Beauroon was another marshal whose appointment owed much to politics. As a fiery Republican and former close ally of revolutionary leader Georges Danton, his support was politically useful for Napoleon. Beauroon joined the army during the Terror, the most extreme period of the revolution. His political connections ensured rapid promotion, and he was sent to help put down a counter-revolutionary revolt in Bordeaux. In 1795, as a 30-year-old brigadier general, he helped Napoleon disperse a royalist mob in Paris with the famous whiff of grape shot.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, that might have been Napoleon's second situation that he was involved in as a young officer. That was that little civil unrest in the country, and then it was obviously first Toulon, then that, and then onto Italy, if I'm not mistaken. But
grape shot. Beauroon then served with Napoleon in Italy, fighting in several of his famous early victories. He won a reputation as a fierce divisional commander and enthusiastic plunderer of Italian towns and churches. In 1798, he commanded the French occupation of Switzerland, while extorting 200,000 francs from the wealthy Swiss communes, the equivalent of several $1 million today. It was said that Beauroon's personal carriage was so laden with gold when it left Switzerland that it immediately broke down. The next year he won his most important victory, while commanding French forces in Holland, defeating an Anglo-Russian army at the Battle of Castricum and saving France from invasion. But a short, calamitous spell commanding the army of Italy convinced Napoleon that Beauroon was not fit for high command. Instead, he sent him to be ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, where in 1804 he learned that he'd been made a marshal. But Beauroon's lack of delicacy, combined with a towering sense of self-importance, did not make him a successful diplomat. He was recalled to France, but as governor of the Hanseatic ports, blundered again, drafting a treaty with Sweden that failed to make any mention of the French emperor. Whether a deliberate insult or act of incompetence, Napoleon was furious, and Beauroon was sacked. Beauroon spent the next 7 years at his country estate. He bitterly opposed the return of the Bourbon monarchy in 1814, and rallied to Napoleon when he returned from exile the next year. But in the tumult following Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo, Beauroon was cornered by a royalist mob in Avignon, murdered, and tossed into the River Rhone.
oh, France, some of the things that you guys do to each other is just horrible. Why you guys always like to throw people into rivers and lakes and seas and stuff? I don't understand, but let's keep going.
Rhone. 24. Marshal Sergei. Sergei was another of the 4 honorary marshals whom Napoleon wished to recognize for past service. In contrast to Beauroon, Sergei was a professional soldier of the old school, a veteran of the 7 Years' War, and a stern disciplinarian. This background was not necessarily an asset during the French Revolution, when any officer who'd served in the Royal Army was viewed with suspicion. But Colonel Sergei's training and diligence were soon recognized as assets to the new French Republic. By 1795, he was a general serving with Napoleon in Italy, where his stand against corruption and looting won him the nickname the Virgin of Italy. Sergei was a reliable, if unspectacular, commander, who won an important victory at Mondovi at a crucial moment in Napoleon's rise to fame. The following year, he accepted the Austrian surrender at the end of the long siege of Mantua. 2 years later, fighting under General Moreau's command, Sergei and his division were cut off by the Russians and forced to surrender. Released on parole, he was back in Paris in time to support Napoleon's coup d'etat of 18 Brumaire. Sergei then retired from active command, but Napoleon, remembering his past service, made him an honorary marshal and governor of Les Invalides, the retirement home and hospital for old soldiers. There, shortly before the fall of Paris in 1814, Sergei oversaw the burning of more than 1,000 captured flags and standards to prevent them.
God, and that sucks too. Could you imagine seeing those today in a side of a museum or something? Just seeing all those captured standards. It would just been so cool to see. I don't know. Just one of those things that always get. I might make a video of the different historical artifacts that have been destroyed throughout history because of different things like this. Cause you gotta think of the train, caboose car, whatever that Hitler had destroyed. That was that had the signing of for World War I or whatever. Which one? You know what I'm talking about. I can't think right now, but all those things were destroyed, and it's just been so cool to see all those things. But yeah, let's keep going.
Saw the burning of more than 1,000 captured flags and standards to prevent them falling into Allied hands. 23. Marshal Kellerman. Kellerman was another honorary marshal, the oldest at 68, and famed throughout France as the saviour of the Revolution. A career soldier from a middle-class background, he'd seen distinguished service as a cavalry officer in the 7 Years' War. At the beginning of the Revolutionary Wars, he was a general, commanding a frontier army at the moment of greatest crisis, when it seemed foreign invasion was about to stamp out the revolution and restore the ancien régime. But at Valmy, in September 1792, Kellerman's Army of the Centre stood its ground, and with a ferocious artillery barrage, persuaded the Prussian army to withdraw. Valmy was not a stunning tactical victory, but it was a turning point of history that saved the infant French Republic. When the revolution took a more radical turn, even a war hero like Kellerman became suspected of royalist links, and spent a year in prison under the threat of the guillotine. Acquitted and restored to command, he was poised to launch a new offensive in Italy, when he was sidelined, first by General Scherer, then in favour of a rising new talent, General Bonaparte. Kellerman later specialised in army administration and training, a role he continued to perform under Napoleon, whilst also entering politics and serving as President of the Senate. His son, General François-Étienne Kellerman, followed in his father's footsteps, serving as one of Napoleon's best cavalry commanders. 22. Marshal Grouchy. When Napoleon returned from his first exile in 1815, he created one last marshal for the upcoming campaign, Emmanuel de Grouchy. Although now infamous for failing to march to Napoleon's aid during the Battle of Waterloo, up to that moment Grouchy had had a long and distinguished military career. An aristocrat who embraced the French Revolution, Grouchy served with distinction throughout the Revolutionary Wars, fighting counter-revolutionaries in the Vendée, and serving in Italy, where he was wounded and captured at the Battle of Novi. Under the Empire, Grouchy excelled as commander of a dragoon division in Marshal Murat's cavalry reserve. He was praised by the Emperor for his part in the Great French Charge at Eylau, played an important role buying time for Napoleon at Friedland, and expertly covered the French right wing at Wagram. For the invasion of Russia, he commanded 3rd Cavalry Corps and was wounded at Borodino.
It's crazy that, you know what I'm saying, that men actually, there are men, you know, out there, obviously not out there now, but there were men out there in history that, you know what I'm saying, went through almost every single one of these battles, you know what I'm saying, if not all these battles in the Napoleonic Wars. That's just crazy to think about, you know what I'm saying, like, these are some of the most epic historical battles in history, and there were men who were in every single one of them, and who lived to be, you know what I'm saying, that's just crazy to think about to me.
He commanded 3rd Cavalry Corps, and was wounded at Borodino. He survived the horrors of the retreat, but was left so exhausted it took him several months to recover. He returned for Napoleon's 1814 campaign in France, and was wounded twice more. Grouchy was made a marshal at the start of the 100 Days campaign, and commanded Napoleon's right wing at Ligny. After the battle was won, he was ordered to pursue the retreating Prussians to prevent them joining up with Wellington's Anglo-Allied army. 2 days later, as the Battle of Waterloo raged 10 miles to the west, Grouchy made the fateful decision to follow his written orders, rather than march to join Napoleon, and has been widely blamed for the French Emperor's defeat ever since.
And not to mention, that wasn't just on him. I mean, there was a whole bunch of several factors at Waterloo as to why they lost. I mean, freaking, again, and Ney is my favorite marshal, but I mean, even Ney had the dumbest, move of committing the cavalry without any infantry backup, essentially making it so that the cavalry was circling the infantry squares, getting mown down. You know what I'm saying? Look, there's multiple factors to it, so you just can't blame him. I'm sure that was a big factor, but it wasn't the only factor, though.
Grouchy's vilification is not wholly fair, not least because Napoleon rarely encouraged his marshals to show initiative, and often flew into rages if they deviated from his written orders. Nor should one blunder obscure the distinguished record of one of the Grande Armée's best cavalry generals. Grouchy fled to America after Napoleon's defeat to escape royalist reprisals, but was pardoned and returned to France in 1820. 21. Marshal Monsieur. Monsieur ran away from home to join the army at the age of 15. After 20 years of uneventful service, he'd risen no higher than the rank of captain. But then came the French Revolution. Most French officers were aristocrats, who, if they did not actively oppose the revolution, were nevertheless regarded as politically suspect. The result was that 3/4 of them either fled the country or were dismissed from the army. Monsieur, a middle-class officer with no strong political views, reaped the benefit, with meteoric promotion. By 1794, General Monsieur was leading the army of the Western Pyrenees to victory over the Spanish, on what was admittedly a relative backwater of the Revolutionary Wars. In 1797 he was dismissed for alleged royalist sympathies, but reinstated in time to support Napoleon's coup of 18 Brumaire. By his own admission, Monsieur was a sensitive...
So essentially it just kind of sounds like he was very meteoric, and he was fine with being meteoric. Like, he almost sounds like he sought out to not, go too crazy, or, you know what I'm saying, he just wanted to have a simple kind of life as being a general, kind of sounded like.
Brumaire. By his own admission, Monsieur was a sensitive officer. Honest, honourable, but lacking a ruthless streak or iron will to succeed. Napoleon was aware of his limitations as a general, but made him a marshal in 1804 as part of his emphasis on continuity between the Republic and his new empire. Monsieur was appointed Inspector General of the Gendarmerie, France's militarized police force, and spent most of the rest of his career commanding reserve troops. He only held one field command again. In light of his victorious record against the Spanish, he was given command of a corps for the 1808 invasion of Spain, operating in the south of the country with mixed success. In 1809 he was replaced by General Junot and returned to France. Monsieur's finest hour came in the dying days of the Empire, leading the National Guard of Paris in a courageous but doomed defense of the French capital. In 1815, the restored King of France, Louis XVIII, ordered Marshal Monsieur to preside at the trial of Marshal Ney for treason. Monsieur regarded Ney as a hero for having saved so many French lives in Russia, and refused, declaring, "If I am not allowed to save my country nor my own life, then at least I will save my honour." After a short spell in prison, Monsieur was allowed to resume his military career, becoming governor of Les Invalides, in which role he presided over the repatriation of Napoleon's remains from St. Helena in 1840. At the end of the ceremony, the 86-year-old Marshal Monsieur announced, "And now, let us go home to die."
And they made that freaking procession like if you ever seen pictures of it, it's like the most grandest thing you've ever seen. Like, the thing that they carried his coffin on was humongous, just going throughout the street. Like, you can tell, like, that country loved them some Napoleon, no matter how many lives he technically drugged through hell, ruined, and everything else. They loved that man. Which, technically speaking, if you think about it, he kind of ruined more German lives than he did French lives. So It kind of would make sense, but
20. Marshal Pognatovsky. Prince Joseph Pognatovsky.
If I'm not mistaken, I just want to say, think if I can get this before he says anything. If I'm not mistaken, is a Polish prince from the Duchy of Warsaw. That's all I know about him, but if I'm not mistaken, and obviously his name is like a dead giveaway with that. But yeah,
Prince Joseph Pognatovsky was the King of Poland's nephew, but his military career began as a cavalry officer in the Austrian army, even serving as aide-de-camp to Emperor Joseph II himself. In 1789, he transferred to the Polish army with the rank of Major General, but could not save Poland from partition by its rapacious neighbours. And
if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, but he was killed whenever his horse, he was trying to flee over a river, and I'm pretty sure it was Leipzig, if I'm not mistaken. But he was trying to flee over a river with his horse, and his horse, I think, like, something happened, and his horse pretty much rolled over, and it rolled over him in the river and drowned him with the horse on top of him. But it was pretty bad.
Could not save Poland from partition by its rapacious neighbours, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. By 1795, Poland had vanished from the map, swallowed up by its rivals. After Napoleon's defeat of Prussia in 1806, Poniatowski decided loyal service to the French Emperor was the best way to win Poland's restoration, although he never fully trusted Napoleon's aims. Sombre, serious, and brave, Poniatowski proved an able commander of Duchy of Warsaw forces in Napoleon's service. When war broke out with Austria in 1809, while Napoleon advanced on Vienna, Poniatowski waged a brilliant supporting campaign against a larger Austrian army in Galicia. For the invasion of Russia, he commanded the Polish Fifth Corps. He and his troops distinguished themselves first at Smolensk and again at Borodino, leading the attack on the right wing. Poniatowski and his corps performed heroically throughout the campaign, motivated in part by their old animosity towards Russia. But by the end of the retreat, Fifth Corps had been virtually destroyed. Poniatowski remained loyal to Napoleon, even though the disaster in Russia paved the way for the Russian reoccupation of Poland. He rejoined Napoleon in Germany in 1813 and was given command of the Polish Eighth Corps. On the eve of the Battle of Leipzig, he was made a marshal by Napoleon in recognition of his service and to inspire his Polish troops. Poniatowski was the only non-Frenchman to receive this honor. He and his troops fought with their usual tenacity and skill at Leipzig, holding key villages on the southern front against the Austrian and Prussian onslaught. At the end of the battle, Poniatowski commanded part of the rearguard. But their only escape route, a bridge over the Elster River, was blown up too soon. Badly wounded, Poniatowski tried to escape by riding his horse across the river, but he was swept from his saddle and drowned. He had been a marshal for just 4 days. In the short term, Poniatowski's loyalty to France achieved nothing, as following Napoleon's defeat, Russia occupied Poland for the next century.
Yeah, literally, I mean, it made them it gave them their country back but only for literally not even 20 years, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then Russia just came right back in. Russia, Prussia, and all of them just came right flooding. And, Austria just came flooding right back in, and, you know what I'm saying, all those lives lost for nothing. It's just crazy to think about.
Poniatowski's loyalty to France achieved nothing, as following Napoleon's defeat, Russia occupied Poland for the next century. But Poniatowski's legend lived on, a model of Polish patriotism that inspired future generations.
Even though he looks like he's wearing old, like really old, ancient, looks like almost either Roman or Greek armor. That's weird. almost looks like it would have been cooler if they would have just had him in his cavalry uniform as one that could, like, it almost, like, people who don't know history are going to pass it and think, oh, is that a Roman statue? That's cool. And then keep it moving, like, no, that's not Roman model, you know what I'm saying? I don't know.
19. Marshal Jordaan. As a young French private, Jordaan saw combat in Georgia during the American Revolutionary War, but he then caught a fever that led to his discharge and plagued him for the rest of his life. When the French Revolution began, he was elected captain of his local National Guard unit, fought at the battles of Jemappes and Hochschutter, and was rapidly promoted to general. In 1794, he made his name defeating coalition forces at the Battle of Fleurus. This was a crucial victory of the Revolutionary War, which handed France control of Belgium for 20 years. It was also notable for the French army's use of balloon reconnaissance, the first effective use of an aircraft in military history. Jordaan became a prominent politician under the Directory, lending his name to a law that formalized France's policy of mass conscription. As a committed Republican, Jordaan refused to support Napoleon's coup of 18 Brumaire, but his fame as the victor of Fleurus was enough to ensure he became a marshal in 1804. Jordaan was on good terms with Napoleon's elder brother, Joseph. When Joseph became king of Spain in 1808, Jordaan went with him as his military advisor. But the situation in Spain would prove beyond Jordaan's military skills to solve. He faced stubborn resistance from the Spanish and Portuguese, supported by the British, and an equally stubborn refusal to cooperate from other French marshals in Spain, theoretically under Jordaan's command, but who repeatedly ignored his orders and openly questioned his competence. Marshal Soult in Andalusia was a prime offender, while Marshal Victor's insubordination at the Battle of Talavera contributed directly to the French defeat. Struck by another bout of ill health, Jordaan went home to recover. 2 years later he returned to Spain, but at the Battle of Vitoria in 1813, he and King Joseph were outmaneuvered and decisively beaten by Wellington, leading to the collapse of the Bonapartist kingdom.
And in reality, though, too, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of that wasn't even his fault because he wasn't there in the beginning of the battle in order to set up the army the way that it should have been set up, because they had it set up like in a vertical column almost, and the British had theirs set up, in a more of a horizontal one. So they just got smacked so hard, but. There's a lot more to that. Obviously, we've seen the video, but yeah.
Collapse of the Bonapartist kingdom of Spain. Jordaan never held a major command again, but his 20 years of service and evident patriotism were widely recognized and respected. He was made a peer by Napoleon, a count by Louis XVIII, and died in 1833 while serving as governor of Les Invalides. Perignon, Brune, Serrurier, Kellerman, Grouchy, Moncey, Pognatovsky, Jordaan. 8 down, 18 to go. Join us for part 2, when we'll continue the countdown. Coming soon.
Alright guys, we'll go ahead and end it right there. So yeah, definitely, if you guys follow me on this channel a lot, if you guys look at especially a lot of my original videos that I try to put out here, I don't know why I just become such a huge Napoleonic Wars fan. Just the uniforms, the gallantry of it, the dramatics of it, all of it it's almost captivating to me. But in any case, so thank you guys again for joining me on another episode of Mike's Intellectual Corner. If you guys like this one, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys on another one. I'm out.